you grew up around producing food. Like that was your family growing up.
Yes, I think I was like 12 years old when we first had a store, which was a refrigerator and me on 2 milk cases selling it to people.
That was the beginning of the store?
Yes,
Just old school.
old school. Yeah,
Selling milk, or what did you all sell?
that's all we did at first was milk. I mean, when we had our first $100 day, it was an incredible achievement.
So talk about what was the farm at that time?
The farm at that time was 80 cows.
80 cows.
Yeah, milking in a flat barn.
Yeah.
And then we put up a bigger barn at 400 cows. And at about that time, things were kind of went south of the market too. So it was a difficult deal.
Yeah.
And paying the bills was very difficult. And I just remember a lot of stress.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes. And
How old were you at that time?
I was a little bit older,
Yeah.
14, 15
Yep.
in there, enough to remember that like one of the big turnarounds was when the Canadian market really took off with cross-border shoppers.
So people coming down to buy the milk and whatever
Cheese,
else
eggs,
from your dairy.
butter, yes.
That was about the age I was too. I remember when we went through some really brutal times on my family's farm, and that's formative, you know, in watching in experiencing that, because it's right when you're kind of just old enough to start grasping, like, oh, don't know what's going to happen next, and will we be able to pay our bills and stuff like that, and watching how your parents handle the stress, you know.
Yes, and that's probably the biggest thing is the change in the business is the things that you don't really see that are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they start happening where not only does your parents have to be good at what they did, which my dad was a great cow person,
Mm-hmm.
but then you have to become a good business person.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be a marketer. And with milk, it's a very difficult item to sell.
Yeah.
Because it's got a shelf life that's not very long. So it's not like you can freeze it and keep it and sell it. So there's a lot of stress involved all the way across.
Now, a lot of the milk that's produced here in the state goes to Dairy Gold, the cooperative. There's some other cooperatives. There are very few of these independent dairies that are selling their, even though there's getting to be more of them around here. Was there anybody else doing that at that time? And what did that take? Like, it's one thing to be Dairy Gold and they have facilities and all that. They take the milk in, they get it ready, they bottle it, whatever. You didn't have any of that starting out, right?
No, we didn't. We just had a very small plant. I remember the route. We had a purple type van with a refrigeration unit on top. And I remember driving that during the summer, and we had this little route that went through Bellingham, you know, out up towards Mount Baker and back again. And also took that van to Seattle once a week and filled it up with product to sell in the store. And the thing would be just squatted down, and I'd be with my grandfather, and I wasn't old enough to drive then or anything, but yeah, he just passed time. He taught me to listen to the Mariners. You know, I think it was
Do you still listen to the Mariners?
It's tougher.
I hear that. Never been into it as much myself. Maybe maybe in the background in the barn kind of thing, but I can't just sit down and listen to a game.
Yeah, and see,
I get too bored.
And that's, I think, you know, when you listen to things and you're not watching things, then your imagination takes hold too, where you are imagining the plays and, you know, going through all that, and you know the game so well, you know what the players look like and things like that. And we'd sit in rush hour traffic, and we'd be listening to the Mariner game, and he'd always stop for cherries somewhere, and he'd shoot cherry pits out the window between his fingers at passing cars and stuff to entertain themselves. So.
Oh, and that's a good point, though, that you bring up as far as having to go get other product to have in your store. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people, even I don't really usually think about. Like, hey, if you have a store, why don't you just sell the stuff that you produce? But you have to have enough stuff there for people to justify coming to your store.
Yes.
Right?
Most of the time, they just aren't going to come for one
Just
item.
milk or
Yes.
whatever.
You got to have something that complements that.
Yeah.
And we tried, with cheese, bread, eggs, butter, and sold a lot of that.
Yeah.
Sold so much of that, especially in the 80s with the Canadian traffic. We would sell, every week we would take probably in 15,000 pounds of cheese that we would sell every week. And it was just unbelievable. We would take a semi-load of milk to Blaine every day.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was crazy.
So many people, because after this era, many years after this, I went to school up in Canada. So many people up there knew about your family's farm.
Yeah.
When they thought of farming and dairy down here, that's what they would think of.
Yes. And so many people just called it the dairy. Oh, we're going to go to the dairy.
Yeah.
And so they cross the border and get their ice cream and everything. It was just always funny to me that that's what it was called, the dairy.
It had to be fun at that time in the moments when things are going well and you're seeing that kind of growth and people are really responding to what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot of fun. And just keeping work fun was the biggest thing. If I could have a good time, play some pranks and do things like that, just keeping things light.
Yeah, for sure.
And after a while, as the business grows, things aren't as light or fun anymore.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more of a serious tone.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, it probably gets to be more and more at stake.
yes.
Right.
And all of a sudden you realize that too. Maybe as you grow older, and I don't know about wiser, but maybe it's easier not to think that way, that there's more at stake.
So what was that like as things grew and you took on more and more responsibility? What would you do out of high school, and how did you kind of go from being the farm kid to working on the farm?
Yeah, I guess out of high school, I did quite a bit of milking the cows and putting in crops, things like that. And the exact opposite probably of my dad, who loved cows, and I really didn't love cows at all.
Yeah.
And then I slowly transferred into running the store as it grew more and more, and then running routes, and things continued to grow. And as things grew, we grew with our customers, I would say.
Yeah.
It's a really hard thing because being in the position we were, you're not allowed to buy milk from Dairy Gold or out of the pool.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to try to adjust for customer growth because they don't want to be stagnant either.
Right.
So that was the hard part. And then we grew. And the hard thing is okay, my dad's specialty is cows.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not his thing is the milk plant.
Yeah.
At all.
Where you have to bring it in, it's stored, and then pasteurized and bottled and homogenized and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. And then
lots to it that probably people don't usually think about.
Oh, there is. And it's kind of that way with any business behind the scenes. You don't realize how much there is to the balancing act of trying to balance what you take in with what you get put out. There's winter storms. There's, there's all sorts of things that play into it. There's holidays and things like that. And so, sometimes you wonder with the business, like the founding fathers per se. It would be my dad and mom, but his expertise being cows. Now, would it be easier for him to stay with the cow part and not to try to transform himself into the business part? I mean, the heart, the nuts and bolts that, behind the scenes that he doesn't like.
Yeah.
So, and then I like that part of it, that end of it, and, making new customers and meeting new people and things like that. So as we grew, I grew up taking more responsibilities, plant management, the route distribution. And we were at that time running about 6 million pounds of milk per month that we were distributing. Yeah.
That's a lot of mouths fed.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, that's what you guys were doing, is feeding this community, certainly, and quite a bit beyond. How far and wide were your products going at that point? Obviously, a lot going north to Canada, too, I guess. Mention.
It was going north to Canada, but that really, when their dollar started to, hit 35%, that their dollar was worth 65 cents American, then traffic slowed a lot, as you can understand.
Yeah.
And we got more into using distributors for our milk. And we got a large distributor in South Seattle who supplied Starbucks with their milk. And as Starbucks grew, we had to grow.
Yeah.
And as you can understand, Starbucks grew to be quite large. And then at one point, we were supplying Western Washington and into the Portland market too for Starbucks. And that was probably, 10 semis of milk a week.
Wow.
Just for them. So it tells you
how much coffee, because that's just the milk and dairy products going into the coffee.
That's right.
Amazing.
And that's just Starbucks. I mean, you want to talk about something that was good for the dairy industry.
Yeah.
That would
be Seattle coffee thing, fad trend, but it's not, because it's outlived being just a fad. Right?
Yeah. It's worldwide.
Yeah.
So it's been great actually for the dairy industry.
Yeah. But I know that's when, for you, it's got more and more stressful.
Oh yeah. I mean,
it's a lot of pressure. Then all of a sudden you're dealing with a big company like Starbucks, and I'm sure what they needed would change, and how to keep pace with that. And you had probably a whole team to manage back here. I mean, what were you doing to keep everything going?
Keeping everything going was pretty difficult, and I didn't help myself. I think when you're younger, you kind of can take on the world a little bit more.
Yep.
And we went through growing pains, and then some things happened for me personally where we let a plant manager go, didn't replace him because I thought I could do that too. And then the guy that was working underneath me left for another job, didn't replace him because I could do that too. And
piling on.
Yeah. Problem was I couldn't. And it wasn't fun anymore either. And then all of a sudden I just cracked. Part of me just died for some reason. For some reason with the food industry, I got in my head that somebody was going to drink our milk and die and sue us, and we would cease to be. And I would lose.
So it was like a paranoia.
Yeah.
That something terrible was going to happen, and that you wouldn't be able to prevent it.
Yeah.
Even though your milk was totally healthy and everything was totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, we, would do counts on our milk, for anything that's in there or whatever, and if a count was, I mean, even within the range of what it was safe, I'd have this freak out factor.
Mm.
And it started to control me. And I was just dying inside, and everybody realized it too.
Mm.
But not knowing really how to handle it was the biggest thing. And my folks, my sisters didn't really know what to do. And what ended up happening was they hired a interventionist, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it was really a strange ordeal for me.
Like one of these people that comes in and helps with like an alcoholic or something?
Yeah, a drug and alcohol type thing. And
but that wasn't the case with you.
It wasn't the case for me because, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, despite the fact that my dad was a smoker and he doesn't smoke anymore, I mean, as a kid, I could have smoked a cigarette anytime I wanted, you know. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, actually, And as far as alcohol, I mean, most of my friends and stuff know that I'm just not into it, you know. That just wasn't my thing. I drunk twice in my life. The second time both times I was 19 years old. And the second time I said to myself, you know what? I just don't want alcohol being the way I have fun.
Yeah.
I want to have fun on my own terms, and just didn't do it again.
So your vice wasn't any of those things. Your vice was stress and taking on too much.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
If I could put words in your mouth.
Oh yeah. I mean, my kids would say too that my vice was, kind of like Edeling dairy. It was my, the way people looked at me. That's how I associated it,
So that's true though. I mean, you mentioned that. That's true for so many people in farming. Because it is their whole life.
It's their
not
identity.
Just you don't clock in and clock out. Often people live on the farm or near the farm. It's their identity. It's their family name on the farm. It's their family legacy and heritage and all these things piled on. That is so different than somebody just going to a job and coming home and like, I'm going to leave work at home, which can be like a mentally healthy thing to do, right?
Oh yes, that is totally a healthy thing to do. But
farming, it's like you can't do that.
No, farming, it's a constant. It's there all the time, and it's kind of all you think about too. And going through the deal with an interventionist, deal where he comes out and I'm not knowing what's going on. I don't even know who this guy is, and I kind of talk about some stuff, and then I say, sometime I'd like to find out what kind of cracked in me, or what find the source of this.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, you can find out. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're leaving today. You have no choice. You'll find out today. Yeah.
Whoa. What was going through your mind at that point?
A lot of anger. I was just ticked off.
At who?
At the time, that guy, I really didn't like him.
Yeah, he was probably prepared for that, though.
Yeah, he was. I mean, and then the hard thing is, that stigma with depression, anxiety, / whatever you want to call it, because it is a stigma that, I was actually, at the time, I admitted I had a problem. I was going to a doctor and I was prescribed medication, and I was seeing a counselor as well, and continue to do that to this day. And that was, 13, 14 years ago that this happened, but, and I really still don't like that guy, but anyway, but, I didn't go that day, and I ended up actually going to a clinic in, Houston, and they just weren't set up they were a drug alcohol type place, so.
And what's that like, even like traveling there? Like I've thought about that before. Like, what if I were in that kind of situation?
Yeah.
Because honestly, I mean, truth be told, I've had my rough patches too. I haven't talked about it too much here on the podcast, but times when, yeah, maybe I could have used an I don't know if it was quite there, but I was really struggling with some things bigger than me and had to also get to that point where I admitted to myself that I had a problem and I needed to seek help and work through some things. But I can't imagine like getting on an airplane and
Yeah. And
to me is that would just like put me even farther over the edge or something.
And it really did. It really,
Yeah.
really did.
Yeah.
It sent me reeling to a darker place yet.
Yeah.
And through that, I mean, being at Houston, it really didn't do me much good. The coolest thing there that if I have to reflect on was this guy named Vince, right? His name was Vincent. He's from the Bronx. Yeah. And he was just like your Italian dude that you would totally think that this guy
just fit the
Oh,
stereotype.
totally, man. And he was rough, tough, and we kind of hit it off. And understand that I'm the 40-year-old and I'm with these guys that are late teens, early 20s, and I'm just kind of, in a way, filling a role in their life almost where, they're just unloading on me, and at night we'd get together at the gazebo and they'd all be smoking their cigarettes, and we'd just be sitting there BSing, how to escape from that place. But,
right.
It's just fun stuff,
Yeah.
And me and that guy got pretty close. We played a few pranks on people that we weren't supposed to do. But, and then the final night I was there, right? We do this happy crappy thing where you tell about your happy part during your day and your crappy part of the day. And it comes to his turn, right? And we all kind of have fun with this, but, it can be serious too as well, and he talks about a happy part of his day, and then he talks about crappy part, and he looks at me and he goes, the crappiest part of my day was finding out he's leaving tomorrow. And this Vincent from the Bronx is tearing up and crying. And I was just like stunned.
Wow.
Yeah, this was a 2-week thing that I was there, but I mean, I don't know what happened to him or, what all happened, but, I mean, that's the thing I look back on, and I remember that, and that just, for me, it's kind of an emotional thing almost that I had an impact on somebody's life just for, a 2-week period.
Yeah.
That this tough guy that, everybody walked around because they were so scared of him, teared up and started crying, so that was the coolest part. But then it was coming home and, I was bitter, I was lonely. And through it all, I ended up leaving and starting another business, but I did not and could not function properly, and it's been a road.
Yeah,
and in that road, I see people that need help.
Yeah.
And even asking them to get help, they won't do it because it's a stigma.
Yeah, you talk about that, just the stigma of, even admitting you have a problem with some sort of mental health thing, that I'm mentally ill. Like that's even me saying that here on this podcast, because exactly. I have battled mental illness. Am I mentally ill at this moment? Probably wouldn't be considered. But it's like if you're sick with something and then you get treated and, it's still an issue and I have to stay on top of it. And if I don't, I will be mentally ill. Yes. But there is still in our society, like if you say that and if you own that, it's kind of like, oh, you're one of the crazies then.
Yes.
That's like a not to be trusted. You're kind of weird.
Yeah. Just pull it together.
Yeah. Why can't you?
Yeah.
And I'm encouraged that, I think more and more these conversations are coming up. in our society and culture now. People are talking about it, but I think we've got a long ways to go.
Well, I think we got a long ways to go, especially in the farming community. I don't care where, I'm not just saying dairy community, I'm saying farming. I mean, it's just not a thing in the United States where it's the number one occupation for suicide rate and depression is farming. Then you go Australia, it's the number one thing. You go the United Kingdom, it's the number one occupation for that. I mean, we can't just push this aside like it's not there, because it is there. And like we talked about before, people's identity is tied in. And I mean, not success in a bad way, but just being able to provide for your family. And if you can't do that, and you're just you don't see yourself as worthwhile.
Where, yeah, if that much of you is connected to that farm, whatever it is for whatever farmer, and then when things don't go well, you feel that's a incredibly deeply personal thing then.
Yeah,
Because
it is.
it's like, I am a failure. It's not the farm or the business or something else. In reality, it should be, but it's like I internalized that, and I failed.
Yes.
And so many people go through that.
Yes. And it, like you said, it can be stuff beyond your control, but your brain doesn't fathom that. That doesn't even enter the picture. You have convinced yourself that you are a failure, and you don't know what to do, because a lot of times in the farming community has changed so much too. It used to be the harder you worked, you could maybe make it work.
Yeah.
You make it come out, but there's so many, farming has become so big, much bigger now. It's not about how hard you work. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah, making the right decisions and being strategic and planning and taking risks, and that can cut both ways. Right?
So there's so much to it, and then, sometimes, I mean, and the hard part too, as I see farmers leave, what they loved, okay, and a lot of times beyond their control, and it's what they love. That's the hardest thing to almost imagine, is that love they have. They work a ton of hours, but what they love is the freedom too that's involved, where they can take an hour or two and go watch their son or daughter play a game of basketball or soccer or something, and then come home and work.
Yeah.
But that freedom. So then I see these farmers that, for whatever reason, have to go to a job that is confining them to a certain hour period. That adjustment is so hard.
Yeah.
And plus they're down.
Yeah. And feeling like I had to leave my farm because I failed.
Yeah.
And
it carries over. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, for me too, and I'm still trying to process at 55, that I have some worthwhile that I can add to somebody's business. And that is so hard for me. And then you throw in, I think, too, the personal part. Your family members are the ones that get hurt the most. Because for me, I could put up a front.
Right.
And my front was humor. I could joke away something pretty easily.
Yeah.
And not go to that raw spot. Because I didn't, and then I'd come home and I'd huddle up by myself and watch TV.
And just kind of marinate in the pain and the stress. I feel this because I did the same thing. I mean, I was in the radio business at the same time, but, I grew up on a farm. I learned some of those same stress ways on the farm. I know my dad has struggled with this stuff too. And it builds and builds, and it's this, festering thing.
Yeah, that's just always there, and it gnaws at you. You got a stomach that's nauseous all the time,
Mm.
you know, just and for me, I lost so many friends through it,
Mm.
either by me just pushing people away because I didn't think they wanted to be around me. Who would want to be around me?
Mm.
I go to basketball games. I would purposely almost sit my wife and I by ourselves
Yep.
because I didn't think anybody would want to sit by me.
So you were, in some ways, a victim of the stigma in your own mind too,
Yeah, they're very true.
right?
Yep.
Like, well, I'm struggling with my mental health, so I must be one of the, a crazy person or something. People wouldn't want to be
Yeah, exactly.
hanging out with me.
And I'm sure you would rather have a broken leg where you could say, sign my cast, this is broken.
Exactly. That is the thing about mental health. It is just another health issue, but it's your mind. It's not visible, it's not tangible, and it's totally misunderstood and loaded with stigma versus all these other health issues that are treatable.
Yeah.
That you just go to the doctor. Like you say, you break your leg, you go to the doctor, they cast you up. Maybe you need surgery,
Mm-hmm.
even, diabetes, which I compare, it's not exactly the same, but it's similar to a chronic mental health thing because it's also a chronic disease that
Yes.
can be managed. But if
Yep.
you don't, it can kill you. Same thing,
That's exactly right.
right?
Totally right. And I mean, the thing is I'm finally where I've got people saying to my wife, hey, I see that old Duane again, which is, encouraging to hear. But at the same token, my immediate family, my wife included, what she's gone through. I mean, yeah, I still beat myself up about, I mean, she's got a full-time job, a great job. And, she's taken the bull by the horns more or less because of my absence of, being there.
Mm-hmm.
And even as a father with my last two kids, I was a different father than I was on my first three kids.
Hmm.
And it's something I feel bad about,
Yeah.
But I'm sure with you too, I mean, the people closest to you, they're the ones that, take the hardest hit.
I could say the same thing. Yeah. And I've said a lot of things and done a lot of things and been things that I really regret. And it's
Mhm.
hard then when the same thing you're fighting is just reinforced by that sense of failure.
Exactly.
It creates yet another vicious cycle.
It's a total catch-22.
And to be able to heal, you have to move on from that. But the disease itself makes it hard to do.
Yes. And the more it repeats itself, which it just continually does, and the way of thinking in your mind, it has to change. And, and for farmers, I think that's a hard thing too, because a lot of times, a lot of stuff they do is by themselves.
Mm.
So if you're by yourself, you're not a lot of times patting yourself on the back.
Yeah.
And if things aren't going good,
That's a good
you're
point.
beating yourself up
Yeah.
more, because I just, you're your own worst enemy most of the time. I know guys that are just like up all the time and give me 10% of that,
Where does all that energy come from? That positivity.
Yes.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Oh, to think though about the things that you go through and the things that you say and the things you do to be able to leave that behind and to be able to. That's awesome to hear that people are saying that to you, like seeing some of that
Yes.
old Duane back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's even, for me, it's reaching out. And I mean, for me, it's always funny because I tell people I'm kind of a shy person. And that's pretty funny to a lot of people. I mean, they just don't look at me that way. But I am, kind of, one of those people that once you get to know me, I don't come across that way, but it's that in between there of getting to know somebody, you know, and feeling comfortable with them. But so I got to reach out now, and I've been reaching out a little more to friends of the past,
Hmm.
you know, and reuniting some friendships. And so, you know, it's a pit though. When you're in that dark place, and I just, you know, I can see it in other people. And if you're in that place, you need to get help. And, you know, it's always preached at me, you can't, you know, do anything until you help yourself.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this way. I think a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
including myself, at times is like, well, this is just the way my life's going to be now.
Yes.
This is it. It's always going to
Yes.
be this way, and it sucks.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
you just give up.
Yep. I
And
mean,
it's like, no, there are things you can, it's not going to be easy.
mm-mm.
There's not a snap your fingers and you're better kind of thing.
No,
But life can still be good.
it can be definitely better. And for me too, I mean, I just like, just counted everything out. I mean, I just kind of like, why does my family even like me anymore?
Hmm.
And the thing is too, is finding a counselor or somebody. And always the amazing thing to me is I always think, you know, counselors, they don't have that bad. I mean, you know, they just sit there and they just listen to you as you pour out your guts. And then 2 weeks later, you do the same thing again. But no, but in all seriousness, you got to find a counselor that works too.
Yeah.
And to take that step and have faith in that step, because they know, they're the professionals. Your doctor knows, or finding a doctor that knows, and getting the help you need. Because I mean,
I remember my first time sitting in a counselor's office,
mm-hmm.
having no idea what to expect, having waited way too long to take that step.
Yeah.
You know, so I was just like wrapped up in stress and anxiety and depression. And it was like it wasn't like I was ready to weep, maybe, but I was just like shaking or something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
just as what's going to happen here? And I can't even explain it. It was an intense experience. And then once I went through, it's like, okay, this is going to be okay. Of course, then a few sessions later, my counselor started pushing me harder, and that was like, oh, you're pushing me towards things that I don't, not ready to deal with yet. You know?
Yeah, I know. And that's the hardest part is, I mean, until you deal with some of those things, you're not really going to get better either.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah.
You got to do the homework that they give you, right?
Yeah, you do. You do. It really sucks, but but yeah, you do have to do that. And you know, for me too, it was finding people that fit the mold for a counselor. I've had 3 different counselors just for different reasons. You know, where one decided to go into a field where they have their own podcast and they reach people doing that and things like that. And another one moved away, and I just remember that for me, I've had 3 counselors and they've all been women. And I've met with also 3 guys for to be counselors, and it just
Didn't click.
It didn't click at all. But so you have to have where you click with somebody too, and don't be scared to say, I just didn't feel comfortable. You know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I do. I feel bad when I've heard people, they go to counseling, I didn't really get much out of it. This is pointless. I shouldn't be doing this. No, maybe you just need to find somebody that's a better fit for you.
Yeah. And the thing is don't give up either.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, totally.
I mean, because that's the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It really is, especially when you're, you know, not feeling well anyway.
It's interesting you talk about seeing it in other people. And I've been thinking about this lately, how mental illness can be contagious.
Mm-hmm. That's
In this
interesting. Yeah.
time of COVID, and everybody focused on contagion and pandemic and all of that, so can mental health through a variety of different ways. And I know in some cases that's part of my story, because I know when I was struggling, I was around people who were also, and that wasn't helping.
No, it doesn't.
They were setting out patterns that weren't helpful for me, and not that I necessarily blame anything about me on them, but it can be contagious. Someone who is continually, dropping interpersonal bombs
Mm-hmm.
in, the team meetings or work stuff or family stuff that constantly causes that, can then cause other people to be stressed and upset, and then they're doing things to other, it's
Yeah.
scary when you see how the dominoes start to fall when it happens.
Oh, yeah, totally. And the hard part is too is, I mean, if we feel sorry for ourselves, well, then if we find somebody else that is feeling sorry for themselves,
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you guys together, hey, we just cry on each other's shoulders, and
Yeah.
somehow that's supposed to make us feel better.
But it could be a race to the bottom too.
Yes, exactly.
Why do you think mental illness is such a hard thing in the farming community? I mean, we've talked about a lot of the things that probably push farmers to struggle
Mm-hmm.
with their mental health, but why is it that nobody wants to talk about it or deal with it?
I think with farmers especially, and I don't know if I want to use a pride factor in that. It's probably a better word, but that's probably the last thing you want to admit to. I mean, you're not going to talk to your fellow farmer about, I can't snap out of this.
Yeah.
I've been down for 3 months or 4 months and I can't get out of it. You're just not going to go there with somebody else because you think they've got it all together. But you know what? They don't.
That's a good point too.
I'm serious. They really don't. If you open yourself up, I just feel that you open up something, and maybe not, but in a large part, so many people actually can understand that pit.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe not as low as maybe as you feel, but a lot of people have been down there. And, but I do think that it is definitely a pride thing. And you are taught to man up.
Yeah.
Come on, man up.
Yeah.
What's your
Just
problem?
deal with it.
Yeah. Snap out of it.
Get your what together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was a youth counselor, leader, whatever you want to call it, I mean, just at a church. And one of the gals from our youth group, when she was in college, called me and told me how bad she was doing. I mean, I regret to this day, is that something I said to her was, well, can't you just snap out of it? I had no idea. That's how naive I was about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I just think, if you're in that area, you gotta reflect and take the time to at least think to yourself, I mean, I got to go to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very hard step for a lot of people.
What was it like for you leaving the family farm and not being a part of that anymore?
That was devastating. Absolutely devastating. Yeah. I mean, everything was wrapped up there. And I mean, friendships, with employees, with customers that you had for, a long time, there's just so much was there that loss. I mean, it still hurts, I mean, that, because, and once again, it's an identity,
Mm-hmm.
and it was something that you took pride in and everything else, you know. So, that loss that wasn't there anymore was probably one of the hardest things for me.
And you eventually then worked into, like you said, you started your own business. And I was still somewhat connected with this world of farming and producing food.
Yeah, yeah. Started a recycling industry or a business.
Yeah. Bringing some sustainability to some of the products used in the agricultural world and beyond.
Yeah,
Explain what that was all about, how that came about.
yeah. I just that came about from having a friend that was in Oregon at the time that contacted me, and they were doing recycling of plastic, farm plastic, whether it be baling twine to drip tape to um, the pesticide containers that the farmers use. And yeah, they were doing that, and they were doing fairly well at it. And I got involved with it, and it's started out just fine.
Mm-hmm.
I had an employee or two, and shipping a lot of plastic, and that normally would go to a landfill.
Yeah.
So
And plastic waste has become such a big focus in recent years. It's important to do something with this other than send it to a landfill, right?
exactly, and that's just it. I mean, that's where, if I wasn't taking it, I mean, that's where it was going. There was no
Mhm.
doubt about that, and that got into taking that in nursery pots and nursery trays, from different companies, and it kept growing, and then the market just completely died. And
That's been in the news a bit, particularly in this past year or so, even worse with, first the trade wars, I guess, or whatever, the trade deal
yeah,
negotiating back and forth with China and stuff over the past couple of years, and now with a pandemic, probably that much worse. Where that
yeah,
market has basically just frozen up, right?
yeah, that market has almost like disappeared. So I've been working at getting as much out of here as I can, and whether I continue with this is kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
Where ideally I'd like to probably get a part-time job somewhere, and
Yeah.
then kind
Yeah.
of continue in this and keep it alive, you know. But that that realization too is, okay, did I just fail at something else?
Right. Right.
you know,
Thankfully, hopefully for your sake, you can very much see where its forces far out of your control,
yes,
global forces that
exactly.
are causing that to happen
Yeah,
to you.
exactly. I mean,
But what happens to all that, even just from a sustainability perspective or an environmental perspective, it sucks because of trade stuff and
oh,
all these
absolutely.
things going on. Then is more plastic going into the landfill now that
Yeah,
basically the recycling market has
yeah,
dried up?
much, much, much more plastic is going into the landfills just because there's a lot of cities, towns that have suspended recycling even.
Really?
Yeah, and there's a lot of them that just take certain types of plastic now, and the rest goes into the landfill.
Mm.
Even for me, I mean, the top year that I shipped out of here was just shy of 1 million pounds
Mm.
of product. So, you take that, I mean, 1 million pounds is, going into a landfill now.
Mm. It's a shame.
Yeah, it
That has
is
to happen.
actually. It is. And, we have to think of a way somehow to take care of our own waste
Mhm.
versus shipping it to other countries,
Absolutely.
kind of like out of sight, out of mind type deal,
Yeah.
but really it's not. So
Yeah.
we have a ways to go there.
Yeah. It's something that we as a society need to kind of get real on, I
Yeah,
think.
we do. There's got to be something that can be done that incentivizes, the recycling of it. Because, I can't point my finger and say, hey, they won't bring their stuff here, and nor do I want them to point their finger at me saying, well, why don't you pick it up? You know, because neither one of us wants to do that, because
Right.
there's no market. And, you know, what's the difference? You know, if, you know, so there's got to be some incentive, you know, for, I think all in all, everybody kind of wants to do the right thing. It seems that way to me, because I mean, when I offered the services of picking up plastic to people, they would do it, you know. But when the market died, and, you know, for me to have them bring it here, that's, I mean, and I understand totally, you know, it becomes a financial game for everybody.
Yeah.
So, you know, it all slows up. But yeah, I mean, it was bunker tarps, it was hay bale wrap, it was bunker twine, you know, drip tape, nursery pots, all that kind of stuff that, you know, was being collected. So it's, and I think other countries, it seems like Europe and things like that have a better handle on it than we do in some instances.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of things that we can learn to reduce our amount of plastic waste produced in food from start to finish.
Yes.
And I think people are becoming more and more aware of that too, even right down to the bags that they use at the store kind of thing. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's changed a lot.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your whole story. We've covered a lot of stuff, and this is very near and dear to my heart. And it's always hard for me to talk about it on my own. So I appreciate that you're willing to kind of open yourself up and talk about it, to give me kind of the okay that I can talk about some of my journey with mental health stuff as well. I think it's a huge thing. And since I've been through what I've been through, I'm so passionate about sharing with other people that there is hope and there are things that you can do. And this is an important thing, but it's going to be okay.
Exactly.
There are people who want to help you, and there are things that you can do.
Yeah. And they can help you. I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's been a road, I got to say, but, you know, it is dark, it is bleak sometimes, but there is hope out there. Definitely.